Great to be here today. And I'm not alone. On your screen somewhere is Commissioner Haase, who normally attends these chamber cafes. And I'll invite you to jump in, Carol, on any slide where you'd like to share a bit more detail. So happy to have all of you here. So what I've got for you today is a PowerPoint presentation that roughly organized kind of gives you a tour of the port. And I realize the audience today is us, but I've also yet to find an audience that has familiarity with everything the port owns across Jefferson County. So I think most people find that kind of interesting. So I'll tell you a bit about the port, what the port does, what the port owns, how it works, and then focus quite a bit more detail on projects moving forward. So let me share my screen and we'll get the ball rolling. So right out of the gate, you'll notice the port adopted just last year a new logo. I think what Commissioner Haase's quote was our old one was anatomically incorrect from a sailboat rigging standpoint. And I found myself frustrated that I could find no reference in history as to why it looked the way it looked. And now you see a boat Alcyone, which has been in Port Townsend since the mid-50s, sailing home to port with Point Wilson in the background. So a bit complicated for a lot of logos, but we're pretty excited that it represents a real boat and some living history right here in Port Townsend, and something you see every day, all summer long, if you're where I happen to be, which is at Point Hudson right now. If I just look behind me through the windows, this is the sight we'd see. So something we think is pretty cool. And you'll see that going up really across Jefferson County on port properties to just bring these properties together as a single place. Let's make sure this is advancing. There we are. So the Port of Port Townsend is a local government entity. It was created by the voters of Jefferson County in 1924. It's governed by 3 elected officials who represent people the same way that the county commissioners do. So our districts are identical. District 1 is Commissioner Petronic, District 2, Commissioner Haase, and District 3, Commissioner Henke. And I think I may be one of the few people who work for not just 3 commissioners, but 3 actual captains. And it's pretty exciting at the port to have a team that has come together as well as our team has, aligned in their understanding of the port, the community, and their vision for the future. So just quickly by the numbers, and I share this slide in part because I moved here 3 years ago from Skagit County, and it's easy for me to kind of compare the communities. Jefferson County is pretty small, 33,605 people. We have only 1 city, only 1 public utility district, and 1 port district. And for the Port of Port Townsend, our 2023 budget's about $18 million. More than half of which is in capital projects. So the port is unique. Ports in Washington State, there are 75 ports, more in our state than in the rest of the nation combined. And we're the only local government entity whose primary purpose is economic development. And most of the money that the port generates, it generates from its own operations. So ports have an entrepreneurial spirit about them. And in our case, our revenue from operations is about $7.5 million. And the port generates about $3.7 million from property taxpayers. And that's broken out into 2 taxes. One is your general property tax of about $1.1 million. And the other is the industrial development district levy that the voters of Jefferson County approved in 2019, which currently generates about $2.6 million a year for the port, but limited in investment to capital projects within our industrial development district area. Probably maybe a bit more than you need to know, but an interesting note on that IDD levy This is something that the port can do only 3 times in its lifetime. It was first used to rebuild the Point Hudson jetty in the 60s. Right now, we're using it to do projects all over the place. And this levy has a capped total dollar amount of 16.9 million, which the commissioners can take over time in as many as 20 years or as few as 6 years. And we're currently on track to utilize all of the IDD levy by 2027. Port has 39 employees, although the commission approved hiring a new full-time employee on Wednesday. So we'll be adding a second professional engineer to our team to help manage projects, bringing our employee total to 40. So starting right here at Point Hudson, we have this really super cool and unique property that for the port has 32 slips and a whole bunch of linear space. We get about 5,000 marina guests a year, 48 RV spaces, and I don't have the most recent number on RV guests, although we'll have that next week. Point Hudson generates about $1.5 million a year. Historically, a really interesting property in that it was owned by Jefferson County. The port actually leased it for a little while. The federal government bought it in the early 30s to develop United States Quarantine Station Port Townsend, but never operated as such, and instead was operated as Army, Navy, and Coast Guard stations until 1956, when the port acquired it again from the federal government. 3 kind of homes too here. The Wooden Boat Festival, which is huge, and Commissioner Hasse, I'd probably ask you to jump in on the boat festival. And also I like to mention Schooner Martha, which is the oldest working sailboat in Washington, and Puget Sound Express, which had about 17,000 guests come through Point Hudson in 2022.
Well, since you invited me to jump in, Erin, thank you. Always a pleasure and a privilege to be a part of the Chamber Cafe, but also to be a part of the port with Erin at the helm there. So the Wooden Boat Festival, most of you know, was started in 1977. I had the unique opportunity and privilege to be involved in the first one, and the joy of it still remains, I believe, in this community, how we've managed to retain the magic of a festival that's over 40 years old, and the quality of people it brings to town, and the inspiration that it is to the marine trades. And it was 2 years after the festival started that the inspiration to start a boat school, Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building, happened. And I sort of see this marine trades community and the relationship of the Wooden Boat Festival to the boat school graduates coming to our working waterfront is just a beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful for it.
Excellent. So continuing on our tour, just for fun, a few of the, I think maybe lesser known port properties, but in the upper left there is, you see the Marine Science Center Pier and Wharf at Fort Worden. The port does not own that, but the beach beginning just on the other side of that wharf, all the way to the entrance of Fort Worden, is owned by the port, including that bluff up to the entrance road, which I think was called road number 2 back in the day. Another fun historical tidbit, the port bought Fort Worden in 1956, and I understand it required intervention of the governor. At the time, Fort Worden had been put out for sale, and I guess a wealthy business person from the Midwest was top bidder, and the governor reached out to that person and asked him to step aside, allowing the port as number 2 bidder to take possession of Fort Worden, I think largely for the purpose of selling it to the state the following year. But as part of that sale, the port retained the beach for industrial development. At the time, it owned the tidelands where all the mooring buoys are. And also at that time, the port took, I think, 3 buildings off of Fort Worden. one of which ended up in Quilcene and two apparently ended up at the airport. Then right below that is a Port Hadlock, and you see the Northwest School of Wood and Boat building. The port owns that dock, pier, and believe it or not, there is a boat launch there. I know you can't quite see it. It needs some work, but that's a port facility. Bottom right, downtown Port Townsend, you see Union Wharf in the front there. And then moving along the waterfront, you see the old Quincy Street Ferry Terminal. That was acquired by the port, I think, in about 1983 or 84, again for kind of waterfront industrial development. And then past that, you see City Dock. So all those are port facilities. Upper right is the boat launch in Mats Bay. So there's a few things that the port has along the waterfront and downtown there. This is Mats. I like to share this slide because it's just kind of crazy, really. This particular boat hauled out with the intent, I guess, to do some work and maybe actually haul out and end up on a trailer. We have, with these properties spread across the county, some of the challenges the port faces is just ensuring compliance with our environmental regulations and our rules and procedures. The port's mission in owning places like the boat launch at Mats is really to facilitate getting people out onto the water. But we see some odd things here and there, and this is one of them. The heart of the port's economic development operation is really centered in the boatyard and the Boat Haven Marina. And what you see here is the commercial basin with kind of priority tie-up for fishing vessels, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Osprey. Coast Guard's had a continuous presence in Port Townsend since something like 1856. So pretty remarkable history. And then that upland boatyard. And I'll talk a bit more about the boatyard and show you a little video tour of it here shortly. The boatyard is the heart of the marine trade sector, and the marine trade sector represents 20% of all of the jobs in Jefferson County. That's according to the Martin and Associates study that the Port Townsend Marine Trades Association commissioned in 2018. They're doing an update on that study right now. The other interesting feature in Port Townsend that, if you go to any other marina, I know from Anacortes to Ludlow, wherever you want to go, and you walk the docks, number one, you might find that you can't. You're going to walk to the dock and find a lovely gate. We don't have gates. We don't have fences at any of our marinas, even the boatyard, even the airport. So there's a community kind of ethos of just open, transparent operation and inviting people to enjoy it. The other thing, when you look across the marina, a lot of these marinas, you see some pretty remarkable, bright kind of fiberglass vessels. Lots of glass and bright white. You look across our marina and you'll find that there are actually, we've cataloged 100 wooden boats. So very unusual to see that kind of collection of history, newly built boats, but using wood as the technology and basis. So something the port and the owners of these boats are really pretty proud of, and a distinction. The boatyard, one other just interesting thing to note, the more typical port model for a boatyard would be the port owns the land and then leases the yard to somebody else to operate, so that the operator would run the travel lifts, own the travel lift, and be the trade. So more like a mechanic garage where you want to pull in and you get your work done, no problem. They'll put your car in the garage, they'll put it on the lift, and they'll do the work. In Port Townsend, because the port owns the yard, all the travel lifts, and runs them, it would be akin to you taking your car to the garage and having somebody put it up on the lift, and then you walk in and do the work, or hire one of hundreds of mechanics standing by who could help you if you need help. So just not something you see very many places. And for those who know this boatyard, I hear just almost universal praise and love for it. And our stats would suggest that that's all true. We are, again, at 100% capacity, trying to find creative places to put boats so folks can get the work done that they need done, particularly right now before they go to Alaska to begin the fishing season. So a few of the wooden boats at Port Townsend. I think you might recognize some of these, but the bottom left there is Dr. Bertram Levy's boat. He and his wife have sailed extensively, including blue water sailing, built by him right here. Upper left is Casey Cronkite's boat, Pax, which if you get a chance, you find her book at the bookstore, Finding Pax. And middle boat is a familiar boat to anybody who's wandered Point Hudson, having been in this marina for 40, how many years, Carol?
1979.
Okay.
44 years.
Going into 44 years. So that's Commissioner Hassia's boat. And then sockeye in the upper right there, another boat I've enjoyed getting to see and even go for a little boat ride on, owned by Carl Berger and his wife. Okay. So boats, for us, the bumper sticker is more than a bumper sticker, which is boats equal good jobs, no question about it. And, you know, the variety of boats you see hauled at the port is, you know, it's everything. We'll take any boat, and there are people who can work on it. So, you know, that middle boat there's the Steinbeck boat, the Western Flyer. The boat on the right, Gretchen, a working boat that I think hails out of Alaska. And the boat on the left is the boat that Commissioner Petronic and her partner Rick have fish on. So that's a working trolling schooner. There are not very many of those currently in use, but popular, I guess, back in the 70s when fuel prices spiked, and they painstakingly transitioned this boat, which was built right here in Port Townsend by Skookum Boat Works, from a pleasure craft to a working fishing boat. And you'll see it leave the marina here in the coming month or so, and then you see the salmon being delivered by bicycle all fall, winter, spring long. So I'm going to play this short. This is just about 4 or 5 minutes. It's a video intended to show you a bit more of the boatyard and the spirit, which I think is very difficult to describe and best understood from being there. So the next best thing I've got for you is a brief video.
I first heard about Port Townsend 35 years ago when I was staying in France. If you want to do boat building, you should go to Port Townsend because that's the best place. It was that kind of environment where you could just come with some tools and knowledge and start working. And that fostered the growth of the business.
This yard is pretty funky. It's got a lot of history to it. I love hearing the old stories from the guys and ladies who were here back in the 70s. We have the chip supply stores right there, Admiral Chip Supply, and then you can walk 100 feet away and get a cup of coffee from a coffee roastery. And people come down here and walk their dogs and ride their bikes. You can sit at the Blue Moose Cafe and have a 75-ton traveler drive right in front of you with a boat on it. So many yards on the West Coast are just private yards where a boat owner can't even work on their own boat. You know, the company hauls your boat out and you're not even allowed in the workspace. Around here, we're working side by side often with boat owners and fishermen. They're doing part of the work. They're helping us. And people from the community are walking by. And
I have been working in and out of the port for over 30 years. We've been in this spot for over 20 years. We've been working on projects, you know, from the 26-foot sailboat to the 165-foot super yacht with a variety of tradespeople. We've got customers who've been coming back for over 20 years. And there's this wonderful integrated high integrity group of tradespeople that work down here on the waterfront that cover all the skill sets that are required for any customer to get their job, you know, started and finished here.
the Port of Fort Townsend is full of people who have aimed their lives at this industry. And when you've got that wide variety of experience from outside the port, and wide variety of interests and wide variety of skills, and then all those people have come to the Port of Fort Townsend, and then, as I say, aimed their lives at this industry. That's an awful lot of talent and thought that is brought to the acreage that is the industrial zone.
We're pretty generous with our time and stuff. And so the object being the more boats that come here, the more business we'll have. And so we kind of cooperated with all the little startups and giving them a hand, and they give us a hand. And I mean, some of the big projects that have happened here have gone, like the launching of the Viva, that got 163 footer that had no frame built, and they brought it out of the building and got it across the parking lot, and the outfit they contracted with the water couldn't do it. So we had like a 3-day tidal window, every business shut down, and not get that boat in the water. It was pretty interesting.
One thing I see that we all have in common between the different shops is the desire to see the trade continue. There's definitely a worry that you can look around the country and see that a lot of shops like this is closed down. There are not a lot of places where you can find this kind of concentration of skilled crafts and trades like we have in Fort Townsend. So we hope there continues to be a need for us here, and this trade continues to be passed on from generation to generation.
So that Aviva, when it launched, was the largest fiberglass boat in the world. So pretty exciting, some of the things that have come out of the boatyard. Just moving down the county, Jefferson County International Airport is a small general aviation airport. It's got a 3,000-foot runway that was just reconstructed in 2020. We've got pretty limited commercial and industrial activity, although the port does own over 300 acres in that area, and some of it has been zoned to allow for industrial redevelopment, and I'll talk about that a little bit and a bit later. Two kind of notable features at the airport that are fairly unique, and one is the Spruce Goose restaurant. So a restaurant on the ramp was kind of a quintessential airport feature for a long time. Not allowed by the FAA anymore, so any airport that has lost their restaurant on the ramp really can't get it back unless it's a subordinate used to something else. But from what I've seen, it's a favorite at the airport. And then the museum. If you haven't been to the museum in a while, they've just expanded. It's worth a look. Remarkable collection, most of it flyable, and it's not just a static collection. This museum, the Port Townsend Aero Museum, is really a youth training program that allows kids who are 13 to 18 years old to volunteer time running the museum, both at the museum shop, doing the docent type tours, working on airplanes for restoration and refit, and then in exchange they learn to fly. So if you start in this program as a 13 or 14-year-old and you get bit by the bug, there's no reason that by the time you can drive a car, you'll also have your private pilot's license and be working on various additional certifications. Coal seam, something that I think a lot of people have been paying attention to lately. It's been in the news. The port's been working hard on a community-based plan to kind of reinvest and upgrade the Herbeck Marina. Port owns about 60 5 acres in Quilcene. Most of it's the upland forested area. A little bit of it's the marina, and there's just a lot of work to be done there. The breakwater's in trouble. The marina needs to be dredged. The docks and floats are old. We do have some good news, which is we're just on the cusp of being awarded about $1 million grant to help support a restroom renovation, a reconstruction of the boat launch, some ADA amenities, parking lot updates, landscaping, but still on our list will be kind of the core marina project. And one of the things we're looking at is the yacht club is, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's sort of above and to the right of Coast Seafood's main facility there. We're looking pretty hard at a project that would allow us to reconstruct a beach in that vicinity. One of the things we hear from the community is they love the beach. Unfortunately, the beach that they love is almost entirely not on port property. So we're thinking about a beach restoration project that would have twofold benefits. One would be, I think, beloved by the community, and 2 would be habitat enhancement in terms of beach nourishment. Last thing in Quilcene is Coast Seafoods is the largest private employer in that part of the county, and that facility supports their operations in, I don't know, something like 9 or 10 different states. So it's pretty remarkable what happens there in terms of oyster farming. So the port's focus has been really pretty significantly on reconstructing, maintaining, capital projects. These couple of slides are fun. They are the Point Hudson breakwater first year, and you see that there's about 200 uncoated steel pilings there, into which I think it was about 2,000 tons of rock. 6,500 tons of rock were inserted last fall and winter, and we're going to be taking a similar approach here this year with the marina closing again right after Wooden Boat Festival, so we can utilize the fish window to do the same type of work on the south breakwater. So you can see the big picture here, just a lot of projects on our list. The breakwaters, we've got pretty significant interest in having a trail system that would allow people to walk the waterfront entirely around Point Hudson. We know we need to do some work in the RV parks to maintain the utility and access, kind of improve the layout. We still have on our list, although I'm not super optimistic we can find a way to fund it, but a cantilevered esplanade that would take you along Jackson Street, so not on the street, but right along the marina. And then lastly, we've been working hard on the buildings here. So these station buildings, again, they were all built, kind of came online about 1956, and they need a lot of work. So we've begun investments in the buildings, and I'll show you here a picture of one. This is the pavilion building. Originally, it was the decontamination building when that was its intended use. But for the last 20 years before COVID, it was home to pygmy kayaks. So the port went in and kind of completely redid this with new windows, new air handling, HVAC, lighting, flooring, the works. So this is now a building available for rent for private parties or weddings or events. And it's also the home of the Port Commission. And in the photo you see here, a joint meeting of the Port Commission, the City Council, and the PUD commissioners. So holds about 99 people, and we're still working on some sound issues there, but otherwise a remarkably beautiful space. So the breakwater that I mentioned right out of the gate, just for fun, the photo on the left was the condition of the North Breakwater last summer, and that piling just sort of sprung one day. So we tried to yard it back to no avail. There was probably a rock or something like that obstructing it at the base. So caution tape to get us through one more season. And then the other 2 photos just showing some construction shots of the North Breakwater being reconstructed. Oh, I do want to mention one more thing here. I probably should add that to my slideshow in the future. We were able to take about 2,000 tons of rock from this structure. So original mats basalt, kind of microalgae covered crustacean encrusted rock that was clean. And we dumped it in the waters of Port Townsend Bay, kind of between the Maritime Center and the South Breakwater. And that has become a remarkable habitat feature with rockfish just coming back. You know, within a couple of weeks, there were 4 species visible. The last dive that was done about 3 weeks ago, there was a school of rockfish that was hundreds in number. So we're working pretty closely with the Scuba Alliance, the Marine Science Center, and WDFW. There will be a team of volunteer divers this summer taking creatures from the South Breakwater and relocating them to the habitat feature prior to demolition. So we're gonna save the animals that we can save. And then there seems to be growing interest in us adding to this habitat feature. And separately, I think we're on the cusp of partnering with the Scuba Alliance to put an underwater camera there with a monitor at the Northwest Maritime Center. So you could walk in and just see live action what's happening there. We'll probably also seek a sanctuary designation, so you can't watch the monitor and throw the fish in the line, the fish hook in the water to catch one of those rockfish. But really very exciting what's going on there with this habitat feature. We're looking at some yard expansion projects in the boatyard. This one, we've had a group that's been working for about a year now. We've got a small curb grant to study feasibility, but looking for more room in the inn and looking for ways to add to the boatyard. We have separately a project that is about 2.7 million to upgrade all of our stormwater treatment in the boatyard. So one of the big issues for us and for anybody who operates a boatyard is our ability to treat any pollutants that come, you know, from the sky, hit the water, or hit boats, hit the gravel, and ultimately end up in the waters of the state. So we treat those to high standards, and in our scenario, we're going to reconstruct that whole system to ensure that we're meeting all of our marks and can maintain viability for future generations. At Boathaven Marina, project-wise, we've got a number of things going. We've got a kind of an annual program that we have yet to kick off, although we've permitted it to do some dock renovation and piling replacements, mostly pulling creosote out, replacing with steel. We have been awarded a federal grant to support replacing the linear dock. And that project, we're thinking, is probably a 2025 project. And then the breakwater at the Boathaven Marina is kind of an interesting situation. That area in red that you see is owned by the port. The other about 1,950 feet is an authorized structure that's run by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Sadly for us, the portion in red is older. It's we think a cedar cofferdam filled with sand and coated in rock construction, and it's failing. So we had planned to do a repair last year. We've deferred the repair in lieu, we're working on a full replacement project. This project, we got a great support from our federal team through the Water Resources Development Act of 2022, where the Corps is now authorized to start working with us on it. Congressman Kilmer selected this as one of his 15 community projects for FY 2024, and both of our senators are helping with that as well. So it's a $7.7 million replacement project, and we're optimistic that we'll find federal support at about 80% that would allow us to move forward with this project. You know, I like to think we could do it in 2024, but realistically, I think the fish window of 2025 is possible, just depending on when the funding comes through. The bulkhead at Boathaven has suffered some damage in recent high tide events. We're working with FEMA on some code and standard replacement, and that ties in with another project that was kind of the centerpiece of our most recent port report. We have noticed that the rising tides that are predicted are here. December 27th, 2022 is the now record high tide event in Port Townsend, and during that event we definitely suffered some flooding. So we are investing millions of dollars in the boatyard, and it's kind of pretty easy to see if we flood on a seasonal tidal basis, that's problematic. So we've begun the process of studying a flood protection project, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it, but phase 1 is drawn in green here that would attempt to tie the high point and Larry Scott Trail to a high point somewhere along Sims Way and the bluffs before the ferry landing. So it'd be an independently viable phase that would probably provide a model for how downtown Port Townsend could be protected in future phase projects. So this was the December 27 event. There was a foot of water in that Gold Star Marine building. It was just, it was a lot that day. It was a pretty remarkable event. So back in 1990, the city imagined an urban waterfront, in the urban waterfront plan, a water walk. And you happen to see on this depiction, this is what it would have looked like, what they imagined it would look like at Boathaven. So what we've done is imagine implementing the 1990 plan, utilizing technology like the city of Mount Vernon has used for their Riverwalk and flood protection project that successfully took Mount Vernon out of the 100-year floodplain. So on the left photo there, you see the water walk. On the right, you see that structure being used for flood protection. So our imagination is we could combine the water walk with flood protection. We could effectively elevate that structure to provide protection at about elevation 16. And if you come to Point Hudson and stand on the point here and look at the north breakwater, you'll note that you're standing at about elevation 13. The top of the breakwater is at about elevation 16. So that'll give you a sense of what we're planning for to address climate change. We've got a small project out at Gardner. So the only public boat launch into Discovery Bay is owned by the port. It's been there since, I don't know, the late 50s or early 60s, probably the early 60s. I think the property rights were granted in 1959. So we were awarded some funding from the Recreation and Conservation Office to replace this. The community, through a community meeting, said, we don't want you to go big. We just want to kind of keep what we have. So what we're proposing here is effectively the same ramp with ADA accessibility added to it. And that's what you're seeing in green there is a concrete access wedge and a seasonal float that would allow people with any mobility challenges to be able to get on and off boats. Today, you really have to put on your boots and kind of jump in the water to get aboard. So not super handy. This is a project we're hoping to build in January of 2024, and it will be mostly built by land with precast concrete panels, although we'll have to drive the pilings, it sounds like, from a water-based barge. I mentioned earlier at the airport that we do have some industrially zoned land, and that's what's depicted here in green. So this is about a 24-acre site. The port received some funding from the United States Department of Commerce and imagined through that process an eco-industrial park, so a little bit smaller scale, a little bit less dense. And you can see that on screen here. And the challenge to date has been the infrastructure costs to support this type of development have been probably prohibitive to the demand, although I'm hearing from just a lot more people on a regular basis that they'd like to expand their business, keep their business in Jefferson County. There's some would like to come to Jefferson County, and there's really nothing available. So I think the time is coming near for this project to pencil out and make sense. It is not currently on our list to advance at the moment, but it's in our minds. And back to the Herb Beck Marina, I mentioned a little bit of this when we were talking before, but just to see it depicted, you see the boat launch, which is now a funded project, the dock and dredge program that we're still figuring out how to fund, and then that breakwater that we hadn't had on our list, but it's become apparent that it needs to be on the list. Oh, and probably the last project I'll mention before taking any questions that folks have is the Shorts Family Farm. So this is something that has, I think, been covered pretty extensively in the press. Just the thumbnail on the farm itself, it's a 253-acre property. It started in the 40s as a dairy, been used most recently for pasture-raised beef, silage, and hay production. The sale for us would include one single-family home and a whole bunch of kind of older farm structures. And our model on this particular acquisition, and I know that there's been some concern expressed that there's a lot of water on the site, that the farm's been kind of run hard with hooved animals, and that there'll be some challenges managing the farm and fish connections, as both Naylor Creek and Chimacum Creek run right through the Shorts family farm. So, you know, we went through a process of looking at everything we could get our hands on in terms of what's been known about this property. And there's actually quite a lot out there in terms of studies and thought process. And we had the property appraised and really determined that if the port just paid fair market value for it, it would be tough to have the creativity to allow this to be used to its maximum benefit for the community. So we sought funding from the legislature, and we'll find out here in about a week if we're successful. But so far it's looking positive. Assuming the legislature does provide the port with the $1 million that we requested, the port will buy it this fall and kick off a farm planning process where we would seek to kind of maximize the economic benefit to the agricultural community of the Shorts family farm. And at the same time, we really want to see the environmental, ecological, and habitat value of these creeks brought back to life. So I think it's going to be a really interesting, it's going to be a challenging process, but you know, my expectation is that this could be a remarkable demonstration site of how these two critical interests can come together and successfully, we can navigate those challenges right here in this community with all of the smart people who want to be involved in that process. So that's the Shorts family farm, and I think that's it. So I'll be happy to take some questions.
Quick thing, Erin, that I'd love for you to share is what's going on with Gunter, the whale.
Oh yeah. I think early on in the presentation, I showed you a picture of Union Wharf, which for people that don't recognize it by its name, that's where you see the small cruise ships tied up in the summer. The Port Townsend Marine Science Center reached out to the port looking for a spot to house a 42-foot gray whale skeleton that's been painstakingly restored, and that's going to be at Union Wharf. So I don't know if it's May or June, but I'd say in the next couple months, look for this. I mean, it's huge, 42 feet. The fluke's like 9 feet, and you'll be able to walk under the tail, and the rest of it will be at ground level, but protected by a railing. So this is it'll be lit a little bit better than Union Wharf is currently lit. So as you come to Port Townsend in the evening by boat or ferry, you'll see this whale skeleton out there. And it'll really be a tie to the Marine Science Center and an educational exhibit licensed by NOAA to the Marine Science Center to share with the community. Yeah, so let's see, I'll stop sharing and see if we've got any questions coming up and any comments, which I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet. But
you did such an amazing job of telling everyone exactly what you do, Erin, that they may be stunned and not typing. So if you have any questions, please put them into the chat. That was fabulous. So I think one of the questions that came in on Facebook was about the farm, and just in the big picture, you know, what kind of operations do you think might be able to happen there that you're going to be talking about later on?
yeah, no, it's a great question, and my answer has been less than satisfying for some folks, which is we are wholly committed to engaging in a farm planning process that has, you know, kind of the right people in the room, full public engagement. So what we're imagining is that there will be probably 3 or 4 kind of boundaries on this process. One, it's going to have whatever the plan is, they'll have to comply with the legal and regulatory framework. So the underlying zoning, the conservation easement that exists that the land trust administers. We want it to be of maximum benefit to the ag community. And we want to see, meaningful progress on these creeks for habitat restoration. And then the last thing is for the dollars that are directly invested by the port, we want a net operating income that is 9.5% of that investment. So pretty small number, really. Otherwise, the creativity is unlimited. So there can be a variety of uses. The reality of the conservation easement is there are 3 building envelopes. So, we're not going to see large scale processing or cold storage or something like that at Shorts Farm. It's going to fit the community, and it won't be out of scale from my perspective. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, that's the answer, is we're going to look to others to tell us what they would like to see.
Exciting. And I think Richard Tucker put a note to you in the chat.
Yeah, I see that. So, and not only are you ready, but you have been. So thank you very much. Yeah, the note is Land Trust ready, standing by to help us. And Land Trust has been very, very helpful to the port in our feasibility process and educating us. There's probably not a whole lot of people who know as much about that property as the Land Trust does today. And we really appreciated that, Richard. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do
Yeah.
we have any other questions from the floor?
I might
Go ahead,
just chime
Carol.
in. I might just chime in, sorry. One of the things that I'm excited about Shorts Farm is that this is an opportunity for young or farmers of any age who may not have the money to buy land or to lease land or to even find land that's available to lease. And this is an opportunity that's in the port's wheelhouse in terms of economic development and hopefully contributing to the food resiliency of our county and a little bit more independence in times of climate change and the big one, whatever might happen. I really appreciate Eron's vision on this. So thank you.
Well, and maybe just a couple brief historical notes just for fun. So the port's 100th year is next year, and we are busily working, actually I say it, Scott Wilson is busily working on researching what will be a kind of 100-year retrospective look at the port. And the history is pretty fascinating. I mean, just a couple fun tidbits. Port actually hired its first engineer, a part-timer who was a former county engineer in I think it was 1927. And one of the tasks was find a site for a mill with suitable water supply. And of course, the mill opened the following year. I might have the year slightly off there. Port also ran the ferry system that went over to Whidbey Island, and that was by contract, but it owned and operated the vessel that served the Hadlock to Marrowstone route. And apparently the minutes are pretty fascinating. In the early 30s, our captain was having a lot of troubles. So it went from excitement, speccing the boat and the engine to, we really need a bridge. So the port led the charge to get a bridge built. But I think the basis of that was largely that we were having troubles running the boat. So, look for some fun things there and save the date. We are going to have a boatyard barbecue this year, September 28th. The port's working with the Production Alliance. So 4 o'clock on the 28th, which is a Thursday, we're going to have live music kind of set on stage under the 300-ton mobile travel lift. Have a salmon dinner. There'll be a beer garden and everything else, but a party. Well, it's really a gratuitous party in the boatyard because it seems like something we should do. So mark that one on your calendar. And we're planning to have a number of events in 2024 to celebrate the 100 years of service to the community, where we can share some of the things the port's done that are maybe less evident.